Welcome to HFY Stories. Please subscribe to the channel. Your one click means the world to me. The dropship's floodlights died between one heartbeat and the next. 5 soldiers stood frozen in absolute dark, weapons still raised, listening to something small and metal clink against the deck plating 3 meters to their left. 2 seconds later, the emergency lighting flickered back on, and none of them were standing where they'd been. Rewind 6 days. Commander Threx had sent 17 soldiers to remove one human woman from a supply outpost, and all 17 were now occupying beds in the medical bay. Lieutenant Carvo delivered the casualty report the way a man delivers a confession, eyes fixed on the floor, scales rippling with the pale stress pattern of someone who had personally watched a private get his weapon harness tied into a bow. She used Nex's own helmet on him, Carvo said. Dren threw himself into a bulkhead trying to grab her wrist. Tiolo's injury is, sir, it's mostly pride. Threx set both primary hands flat on the tactical display and studied the woman's file like it might rearrange itself into something that made sense. Mira Voss, 140 pounds, unarmed, and she had put a full response team in traction without killing a single one of them. She's been leaving reviews of our ration paste, he said. 3 out of 10. She wrote that it was missing any reason to live. Carvo said nothing, which Threx correctly interpreted as agreement. There was exactly one answer to a problem like this. Within the hour, Obsidian squad stood assembled in the launch bay array, 9 feet of Corvin muscle wrapped around a mind built for probability trees. Yenna, whose skin bent light around her like water. Brick, a wall with a pulse. Pip, an engineer whose species could speak to machines the way most people spoke to pets. And Ghost, the one human on the squad, who had gone very quiet the moment he heard the word sanctuary in the briefing. She invoked Protocol 19, Ghost told them, rubbing his eyes. Emergency shelter clause. It's real. It's also for hull breaches, not broken coffee makers. So she's using the rules to hold the door shut, Pip said, antennae ticking with something close to admiration. She's using boredom as a weapon, Ghost said. That's worse. They dropped onto the outpost's landing pad in silence and found the front doors unlocked. The halls were swept clean. Someone had made coffee. Ray did not trust clean halls or the smell of coffee, and he was right not to. They found her in the command chair, boots on the console, a mug balanced on one knee, wearing the exact expression of a woman who had already won an argument nobody else knew they were having. Obsidian squad, she said. They really do send the good ones eventually. Ray leveled his rifle. He cited her exact violation, chapter and subsection, the words crisp with procedure. Filed that one away already, Mira said. You should try the poetry section instead, honestly. She rose slowly, hands open, unhurried. One question before this starts. No questions. Hands where I can see them. She smiled wider. Who's bringing the stretchers? Nobody answered. Ray's tactical computer had run the numbers the moment they'd entered. 1 untrained civilian, 5 combat-rated professionals, odds better than 19 to 1 in his favor. He had learned, in 11 years of service, to distrust any number that felt that comfortable. Mira rolled her shoulders like she was warming up for something athletic instead of catastrophic. Here's the thing about your species versus mine. You built armies. We spent most of our history being afraid of literally everything, weather, the dark, wheat, and then one day we got bored of it. The lights cut out on the last word. What happened in the 2 seconds of darkness that followed would later require 3 separate written statements to reconstruct, and none of them agreed on the order of events. When the backup lighting came back, Ray was on the floor beneath the disassembled pieces of his own rifle, laid out like a diagram from a maintenance manual. Yenna hung from an overhead conduit, her camouflage cloak wound around her like a cocoon, muttering something no translator wanted to touch. Brick stood rigid, arms welded at the joints, able to move nothing but his eyes, which conveyed enormous betrayal. Pip's lower legs were sunk to the knee in a foam that was already beginning to dissolve. Ghost alone sat cross-legged on the floor, untouched, looking less surprised than resigned. Professional courtesy, Mira said, stepping out from behind a console, brushing dust from her palms. Ghost gets a pass, he already knew. Ray stared at his own weapons components scattered around him and felt, for the first time in his career, the specific vertigo of watching a number lie to him. When Threx's voice crackled over the comm demanding a status report, Ray had to ask him to send bolt cutters, a foam solvent, and possibly a therapist. Threx arrived himself, 6 hours later, no armor, no weapon, walking across the landing pad with the gait of a man who had already lost. He found Mira elbow-deep in her ship's engine housing, swapping in the parts his own quartermaster had delivered. "I read every report twice," he said. "None of them explain how." "They didn't take themselves down because I'm dangerous," she said, not looking up from the coil she was seating. "They went down because I know what trained people do under pressure, and I used it against them. Ray thinks in probabilities, so I gave him too much information too fast. Yenna protects her cover until her team needs her, so I made her choose. Brick's strength is stillness, so I made stillness his prison instead of his weapon. That's not survival instinct. That's a psychological profile built in the time it took you to watch us walk through a door. I fly cargo through the Korvac corridor. You don't survive smugglers and pirate toll roads without learning to read a room in under 3 seconds." She wiped her hands and finally faced him. "I filed the parts request the day I landed. Got a form letter back, 30 business days. My life support had 10 left." Threx's mandibles clicked, low and slow, something in Corvin body language closer to shame than surprise. "You should have been escalated the moment the timeline was flagged." "I tried. Every channel bounced. So I made myself a problem your system couldn't file away." She crossed her arms. "There's a difference between an occupation and a woman refusing to die quietly." He was quiet long enough that the wind off the landing pad became the loudest thing between them. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. "The protocol exists precisely for this. My people failed to see the emergency because it didn't come wearing the right uniform. Didn't expect that from a man whose squad I welded shut. I'm a commander, not a coward. I can admit an error." He extended one of his 4 hands. "I would prefer in future that your emergencies not require rebuilding my entire tactical doctrine." "No promises," she said, and shook it anyway. A second ship dropped onto the pad before either of them could say more, sleek, civilian, marked with a dozen system registries. Elena Marks climbed out with the loose, unhurried confidence of someone who had personally witnessed worse and been unimpressed. She looked Threx up and down, then Mira, then the outpost itself. "Word on the freight lanes is you took a military base hostage with a coffee mug," Elena said. "Exaggeration," Mira said. "I only needed the mug for the ending." Elena's grin faded once Threx stepped away to oversee the cleanup, and her voice dropped into something quieter, meant only for Mira. "You keep doing this alone. Europa wasn't your fault, and neither is this, but one of these days alone is going to run out of luck. Solo's the job. Solo's a habit you built out of grief, and you know it." Elena didn't push further. She just held her friend's eyes until Mira looked away first, out toward the twin suns dropping behind the ridge. "I'll think about it," Mira said. "That's all I'm asking." The wandering star lifted off an hour later, systems humming green across the board, the new coil holding steady under the strain of full thrust. Threx's voice followed her up through the comm, dry with the particular exhaustion of a man rewriting his own protocols from scratch. "Try not to occupy anything else on your way out of my sector." "No promises," she said, and meant it fondly this time. Somewhere behind her, Threx was already dictating his official report, choosing each word with the care of a man who knew it would be read by superiors who wouldn't believe it anyway. He left out how it felt to shake her hand. He did not leave out the recommendation at the bottom. Assume nothing, prepare for chaos, keep medical on standby, and never underestimate anything that asks about stretchers before a fight starts. A message chimed through from Ghost as she cleared the system boundary. Ray's compiled a list of 20 ways you could have been stopped. Wanted you to know. She typed back with one hand on the throttle. Tell him I found 4 more on my way out. The reply came fast. He says you're terrifying, also that he respects it. Mira laughed once, short and real, and closed the channel. As the outpost shrank to a point of light behind her, she reached over and set the stolen commissary mug, chipped, still faintly warm, into the cup holder bolted beside her flight stick, the one permanent fixture in a cockpit that had outlived 2 engines and 1 crew. She didn't smile at it. She didn't need to. She just kept it there in easy reach and pointed the ship toward whatever came next.